Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi.
Pagi,
Dr.
Waalaikumsalam.
Fairuz, Dr. Wati pun ada dah, and my fellow colleagues lah. Today, I would like to present regarding common drug overdose, which include PCM, aspirin or salicylate, benzodiazepine or also opioid lah. This presentation is continuation of Izzatul Alia punya presentation on Monday lah. So to begin with, we start with paracetamol. Paracetamol, also known as acetaminophen or acetaminophenol, actively used as analgesics and antipyretics. The main mechanism of action proposed is the inhibition of COX, selectively COX-2, which inhibits generations of prostaglandin and later on reduce pro-inflammatory mediators. That's why PCM we use as painkiller and also demam lah. So plasma half-life is around 2 to 3 hours. The effects after an oral dose last 40 to 5 hours. The availability of paracetamol we can see in the form of tablets, syrups, and also rectal salve. This image is the PCM yang kita boleh nampak over the counter pun boleh, patient datang dengan Panadol kan. Tapi setiap Panadol tu dia ada version lah, tapi usually yang kita pakai PCM dekat hospital ada tablet tu in the form of 500. Okay, yang bawah tu ada sirap PCM, also sub PCM lah. So the mechanism of toxicity of PCM is actually based on the metabolism of paracetamol itself lah. Paracetamol metabolized through liver, around 95% of it will conjugate with glucuronide sulfates and later on excreted through urine. But small chunk of it will undergo CYP450 metabolism lah, which undergo phase 1 reaction with hepatotoxic metabolites, which later on form NADP benzoquinoline ataupun kita panggil NADP. NADP ni untuk dia excreted atau metabolized is it needs to bind with glutathione in our liver, and later on baru boleh conjugated into non-toxic and excreted through urine. When excessive amount of NADP form, biasanya kalau patient makan dengan stacks of PCM, there will be depleted in glutathione level lah. Glutathione ni tak cukup. So instead of binding with glutathione, dia akan binding with nucleophilic hepatocyte micromolecules which forming acetaminophen protein adducts. The binding between acetaminophen with hepatocyte micromolecules is believed to lead to central-lobular hepatic syncosis lah. And other than hepatotoxic, it also can lead to renal failure because of renal papillary necrosis later on. So clinical features. Clinical features we can divide it into 4 phases, depends on the type of injections of PCM lah. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and also phase 4. Phase 1 is from 0 to 24 hours. Usually patient will come with anorexia, nausea and vomiting. Phase 2 around 24 to 72 hours, where at this time patient started to have right hypochondrial pain, and bila kita ambil LFT at this point, we can see elevated liver enzyme lah. PT-NNR may be elevated also. So phase 3 around 72 to 96 hours, where the symptom is more severe. Patient datang dengan severe vomiting, symptoms of liver failure. Patient may come with ascites, jaundice and renal failure lah, and also pancreatitis may occur. And phase 4, the last phase, which is after more than 4 days of onset of injection. Bila ni kat sini symptom akan resolve lah if you treated accordingly, but patient may progress and lead to death later on. So the minimum toxic doses for single injections for adult is around 7.5 to 10 gram lah, around 2 stacks of PCM. Children around 150 mg per kg or 200 mg per kg in healthy children below the age of 6 years. Fetal dose is around 20 to 25 gram and fetal period up to 4 days lah. So management. For management, Alia already presented in the previous presentation, where bila patient datang, kita kena manage accordingly lah. Kita kena decontaminate patient, kita kena secure A, B, C lah, to basic dekat ED lah. So after that, we need to take proper history taking lah. Kita kena make sure yang drug yang dia ambil tu adalah PCM. Kalau boleh, PAP bawa lah kita punya dia punya bekas tag tu kan, kita tengok berapa dos dia, whether dia adalah fast release ke bukan ke, betul ke dia PCM. And then the dosage and type is very important because we need it bila kita nak ambil TDM later on lah. So at the end also the intention lah. Biasanya saya tak pernah encounter dekat ED lagi lah. Tapi selalu saya dengar kalau patient datang dengan suspected PCM poisoning ni adalah suicidal attempt ataupun accidental injection. Budak-budak minum sirap ke ataupun dia makan tu dia fikir gula-gula ke kan. And also kita kena tahu underlying medical illness lah. Kalau patient on certain drugs and alcoholic patient ataupun liver disease patient, dia punya threshold level untuk kita start antidote is different lah between the normal kita punya dia punya management. So blood investigation kita kena ambil ABC, LFT, RP, core and PCM level lah. But you guys should know that PCM level only valid kalau kita ambil after the 4 hours of injection. Kalau kita take then less than 4 hours of injection, the TDM level maybe tak hepatotoxic lagi, not reach at the toxic level lagi. So inpatient will present within 4 hours of injection, gastric AD or lavage should be done lah. Tapi dekat ED kita tak practice lah gastric lavage, tapi kita boleh bagi activated charcoal juga. Saya ada baca activated charcoal ni ada yang kata dia berguna kalau kita bagi less than 1 hour, ada yang kata less than 2 hour. Tu I'm not sure about that lah Doktor. Macam mana Doktor?
Okay, that one usually dependent on apa yang awak makan lah. The reason why kita kata if patient present within 1 hour of injection, activated charcoal tu macam almost always kena bagi, because usually your gastric emptying time, you nak absorb all the medication tu semua within 1 hour tu, medication tu masih dalam perut. So bila you ambil activated charcoal within the first hour or before ni, most of the medication tu is not absorbed yet lah by your body. So whatever ubat yang masih ada dalam perut tu akan activated charcoal tu akan absorb lah and excreted out. Tapi if patient say present after 4 hours of injection, the likelihood of your activated charcoal be useful tu much less lah, sebab by 4 hours most of the whatever yang dia ingest tu is already absorbed into the body, except if unless patient specifically say saya makan paracetamol slow release ke apa semua, then there might be some benefit lah. Tapi that's why activated charcoal apa semua, it's ideally given if patient presented within 1 hour lah. Okay, cuma berbalik kepada yang Khairul cerita tadi. Khairul kata gastric lavage tak practice kat ED. So kat mana yang dipraktisnya?
Tak ada practice kat ED, tapi dekat our ED setting tak practice betul kan?
ED mana yang practice?
Tak tahu.
Gastric lavage ni it's something that everybody likes to mention lah. At best, if patient present within 1 hour, yes, you might want to do gastric lavage. Tapi it's very dependent on what kind of drugs or poison yang ingested lah. Kalau patient ingested something yang corrosive macam bleach ke apa ke, or petrol punya solvent ke apa, it's not advisable to buat gastric lavage, sebab dia dah masuk, dia dah one way dah irritate dah esophagus, then you nak keluarkan lagi, you nak suruh irritate 2 kali. Yang kedua, high risk of aspiration. Yang ketiga, pernah tengok tak gastric lavage punya tube ni?
Besar kan?
Besar, and it's not available basically kat kita tak ada lah. I think most ED kat Malaysia pun dah tak ada, because the evidence towards gastric lavage ini is not strong. More harm than benefit lah. Sebab and it's not as simple as shoving a tube down somebody's throat, masuk air, keluarkan. Dia ada position dia, how much air nak kena masuk. So most of the time if you not done properly, you might end up causing the poison to be absorbed quicker lah rather than ni. So secara general rule ya, gastric lavage is not performed.
Okay.
So dia dah di luar, macam it fell out of favor lah. It's not something yang is done routinely lah. There are situation yang ada you do gastric lavage tapi provided that you have the equipment lah. Okay, nanti ada graph tu ke? Graph yang PCM level?
Ada.
Carry on.
In patients who present within 0 to 24 hours, measurement of the plasma PCM concentration should be done lah. Memang patient datang dengan PCM poisoning, kita suspect PCM poisoning, kita kena hantar TDM level lah, because it's the best predictor of hepatotoxicity. Those whose concentrations are above toxic level, which later on I will show you the nomogram for PCM intoxication lah, are treated either with the antidote is IV acetylcysteine or oral methionine lah. Patients on enzyme inducing drugs, for example like carbamazepine, phenobarb, phenytoin, rifampicin, alcohol, may develop toxicity at lower plasma level. Means that kalau patient ada patient, contohnya patient PSY ada on medication ataupun patient is alcoholic, patut dia ambil PCM. So the threshold level for the TDM tu kita kena lowish kan around 50% from the standard reference values lah. So, what antidote that we use in PCM poisoning is acetylcysteine. How to give acetylcysteine is actually 20 hours punya regime. It's given by IVI in the 5%, initially 150 mg per kg in 200 cc over 15 minutes, followed by 50 mg per kg in 500 cc over 4 hours, then 100 mg per kg in 1000 cc over 16 hours lah. But we need to use it cautiously because dia boleh menyebabkan allergic reaction juga, and especially for asthma patient it may cause bronchospasm lah. If patient not tolerate with acetylcysteine, we can give methionine 2.5 gram per oral every 4 hours for 4 doses as alternative. If patient datang dengan muntah-muntah, kita nak bagi methionine apa function kan, sebab dia per oral, so kita boleh bagi together with antiemetics lah, boleh bagi ondansetron ke, okay. So this is the nomogram for PCM intoxication adapted from Romac and methionine. Memang kita if I'm not mistaken worldwide lah guna, but untuk nomogram punya this nomogram is specific for single injection only lah, for single injection. See the graph is between blood PCM level against time lah. Kalau Olomaphyllocolic C it start 4 hours after the onset of injection, sebab kita nak ambil the maximum PCM level yang dia absorb dekat our blood lah. So if patient datang, okay, kita datang, dia makan one stack of PCM, kita hantar TDM level, dia makan pukul 8. Kalau kita hantar pukul 10 is not valid. So if kita dah hantar if patient makan pukul 8, dah datang pukul 9, so dia baru 1 hour waktu kita ambil TDM level, so not valid. So we need to repeat TDM after 4 hours. So kalau dah makan pukul 8, so kita kena ambil pukul 12. Pukul 12 tu is the valid one lah. And then bila TDM level dah resulted, kita kena plot lah this nomogram. If kita plot dia punya TDM level tu is on the graph or more from the graph, kita kena start antidote lah. Tapi ada satu lagi nomogram lah yang I tak include dalam my presentation, where ada lagi 2 line. Line kedua tu bila double concentration, and line ketiga tu bila dia triple concentration punya TDM level of toxicity lah. Bila double concentration, later on dia punya antidote tu NAC tu kita kena bagi double dose lah. Instead of 100 mg per kg waktu yang 16 hours tu, kita kena bagi 200 per kg. Later on I will show the flow chart to you guys lah.
Okay, so just to ulang balik lah. So if your plot is above the line, toxic lah. Below the line, non-toxic. And macam Khairul cakap tadi, don't take, kalau patient present less than 4 hours before injection, tak perlu ambil TDM level. Only take after 4 hours. Sebab even if you tengok the nomogram pun, they start after 4 hours. So anything that you take before 4 hours, it's not gonna be plottable lah. It's not gonna help you to decide. So membuang masa semua orang lah. Okay. Then tapi untuk initiate treatment, it's not necessary untuk tunggu TDM. If patient already symptomatic and patient boleh bagi clear history di mana bila awak kira toxic dose tu dah lebih, kan, patient dah datang symptomatic, dah ada muntah-muntah, sakit perut, mungkin bruises dan sebagainya, and then bila awak kira dia punya dose, injection dose tu dah lebih pada usually normally they take around, if taken more than 100, some books will say 120 mg per kg, some will take 150 mg per kg lah. So if memang dah very obviously above the toxic dose and patient dah ada symptoms and present say 6-8 hours after injection, then tak perlu tunggu TDM lah. You need to start the antidote urgently. Okay, TDM hantar juga tapi tak perlu tunggu TDM level baru nak start. TDM level ni is for patient yang macam borderline, kadang-kadang mungkin tak sure, mungkin dia kata lepas dia makan dia muntah dan sebagainya.
Okay.
Dan macam Khairul cakap tadi, this is only valid for single injection lah, makan in one go. Kalau patient yang jenis makan sikit-sikit over a period of time, benda ni doesn't hold as much value lah. Carry on bang.
This one is a flow chart of PCM toxic PCM poisoning punya management lah. If patient less than 2 hours, kita boleh bagi activated charcoal, macam cikgu pula. Macam doktor cakap tadi, kita boleh buat gastric lavage juga. Sorry doktor. So less than 2 hours, after kita bagi activated charcoal, kita stabilize patient, kita boleh ambil TDM level after more than 4 hours of onset of injection. And then kita plot, after resulted, kita plot serum paracetamol concentration tu dekat nomogram. If under nomogram punya treatment line, so no need antidote lah. So kita bagi supporting measurement saja. If the TDM ataupun toxic level tu is on or over nomogram treatment line, kita kena tengok dia double ke tak dengan nomogram line. Kalau tak double from toxic level, kita boleh bagi standard assistance systemnya infusion lah, NAC tu macam saya beritahu tadi lah. If dia punya tu adalah double from the toxic line, we need to double up the dose lah dekat second batch tu. Instead bagi 100 mg per kg, kita bagi 200 mg per kg over 16 hours. Lepas tu nampak kan, less than 2 hours, 2 to 8 hours, more than 8 to 24 hours and more than 24 hours tu adalah dia punya injection lah, dia punya onset of injection. Okay, kalau dia datang 2 to 8 hours, kita buat some flow chart yang sama. If the more than 8 to 24 hours, macam doktor cakap tadi, dia tak kisahlah sebab dia dah more than 8 hours. Kalau ada punya history ataupun symptoms memanglah suggested, kita start je dia punya acetylcysteine infusion punya regime. So lepas tu baru kita ambil dia punya PCM level concentration dengan dia punya liver function. If PCM level is under nomogram line and ALT is less than 50 unit per liter, lepas tu kita dah plot kan, kita no further treatment required, kita boleh abandon saja. If PCM concentration tu above the line, kita boleh complete the standard infusion lah, sama yang macam saya beritahu tadi. So bila kita nak continue NAC ni, bila ALT is more than 50 unit per liter and increasing in trend lah, or paracetamol concentration is more than 10 mg. So kalau patient datang dengan memang overdose yang banyak, more than double like up to triple. So instead of we manage patient, but we need to discuss with poison center lah, tanya dia how the proper way lah nah. So this one, these two example is if patient datang dengan staggered overdose instead of single injection. So misal kata patient datang dengan staggered overdose less than 8 hours, dia ambil 4 gram pukul 1, 4 gram pukul 2, 4 gram pukul 3, datang pukul 4. So dia less than 8 hours kan, so kita guna guideline from 8 hours lah. Tapi make sure kita kena anchor dia punya concentration tu dekat the first of injection. So total ada 12 gram. So 12 gram tu kita kena ambil as dia punya dia punya overdose punya level. Okay nah. So sama dengan bawah lah. Bawah ni kalau dia staggered overdose more than 8 hours lah. More than 8 hours macam dalam chart yang flow chart saya bagi tadi, kita start je habis 16. Kita start je NAC. So kita start NAC, betul ambil TDM level, kita manage accurately sama lah. So for pediatric patient with children less than 6 years are thought to be less susceptible to PCM toxicity lah. Furthermore, they usually present with accidental injection. They have rapid absorption and an earlier time to peak paracetamol concentration. Sebab apa? Sebab instead of biasanya kalau budak-budak ni PCM toxic dia PCM overdose dia bukan yang pil, biasanya sebab sirap injection. Sirap ni dia punya half-life lagi laju daripada apa tu, yang tablet lah. So for this kind of case, activated charcoal is not indicated lah. Injection over 200 mg per kg can have a 2-hour PCM concentration. If the 2 to 4 hour concentration is below the 150 mg per liter, NIC is not required. If it is above this level, then repeat a PCM concentration at 4 hours post injection. If at 4 hours level is above 150, then start NIC lah. The above only applies for the well child under the age of 6 with liquid paracetamol. In all other cases, a 4-hour concentration should be performed. Those children will present 4 hours post-injection or in children older than 6 years of age. Treatment is as per adult and PCM exposure guidelines. Any question for PCM?
Ada soalan? Ada soalan kepada Khairul? PCM is something, one of the common drug overdose lah that you encounter lah, sebab it's a fairly popular drug lah dekat Malaysia untuk all the teenagers or you know yang gaduh dengan boyfriend, gaduh dengan girlfriend, because it's easily available lah. Nak beli pergi Watson pun, nak beli 100 papan pun tak ada orang check pun. Nah, so you can just buy it lah, and fairly affordable lah. Less than RM50 dapat dah kot 100 keping, 10 keping ke kan. So you know, be aware lah. Okay, so and then be aware about the things that you need to elicit dalam history. You need to be specific lah, amount, timing, cara makan tu macam mana, because it will determine how you go about the investigation dan sebagainya.
Okay.
Katalah Khairul,
Ya, saya doktor.
katalah dia dah makan PCM, kita dah bagi NAC, double dose, triple dose, tapi the liver function still deteriorate. What are the options we have for this patient? Suruh tulis wasiat siap-siap, pindah harta kat saya.
Tak tahu.
Apa option? Macam you really want to save this patient. You know, dah bagi dah ubat NAC, tapi the liver function keep deteriorating. Patient sekarang dah a bit jaundice, coact, dah derange, you know. Patient katalah umur 19, gadis muda yang cantik.
Liver transplant. Dialysis.
Okay, so the last option is really kena aim for liver transplant lah. Walaupun bunyi dia tu macam a bit impossible or improbable kat Malaysia, you need to get opinion regarding liver transplantation lah. At least kalau kata nak bagi semua peluang kan. So kalau your NAC apa semua tak buat, then the last option is liver transplantation lah. And as you know, dekat Malaysia ni it's not as easily arranged lah. So kalau dah start thinking about liver transplant tu, at least get this patient transferred to a center yang ada, you know, transplant surgeon ke, or ada hepatobiliary team ke, so that we can get things moving lah.
Okay, doktor.
Okay, Karen teruskan dengan salicylic kan?
Betul. Next, in my presentation, I would like to present regarding aspirin or salicylic poisoning lah. Aspirin, also known as ASA, acetyl salicylic acid, which commonly kita bagi after.
Slide hang dah gerakkan ke?
Dah.
Okay.
Commonly given shortly after heart attack or long term to help prevent further heart attack and ischemic stroke lah. Sebab apa? Sebab action of aspirin ni sendiri which inhibit the thromboxane A2 and later on dia reduce the platelet aggregation and platelet punya production lah. Okay, salicylic poisoning can be due to injection of aspirin or LMS. You know tahu kan LMS cream tu yang ubat panas yang kita bagi kat patient kalau patient sakit belakang tu kan. LMS, 1 ml of 25% LMS contain 300 mg of salicylic lah. Injection of 10 to 20 gram of aspirin may be lethal. Aspirin, the toxic dose around same with PCM around 150 mg per kg and lethal dose 450 mg per kg lah. And for methyl salicylic, lethal dose for children around 4 cc of 100% methyl salicylic and adult 6 cc of 100% MS.
Methyl salicylic dia benda? Tu dah ada gambar. Tak apa, dah ada gambar dah tu.
Methylsalicylic yang biasanya kita jumpa, tapi kita tak I believe that most of us tak tahu pun yang drug over the counter ni contain macam minyak cakapak ni, minyak panas kalau sakit otot lah, apalah kita pakai waktu sport tu, contain methylsalicylic. So kadang-kadang kalau ada kes budak-budak kan baru nak ni, dia pergi minum lah, makan lah krim ni kan.
Kalau minum sebotol minyak cakapak yang kecil tu, technically dah lethal dose dah tu. So be careful lah with your minyak cakapak, simpan jauh sikit pada anak-anak dan sebagainya. Usually budak-budak ni dia tak overdose yang tablet aspirin ni, because we don't normally have tablet aspirin. Kita tak guna aspirin as painkiller kat Malaysia ni. I mean if you're in the US ke apa, then aspirin is probably more common than PCM. Tapi yang commonly ada dalam beg opah, simpan dalam laci minyak cakapak ni lah. And kadang-kadang budak kecil macam Khairul cakap yang baru, yang mengutip dan masukkan benda dalam mulut ni, potentially kalau dia terminum lah sebotol minyak cakapak tu, or potentially can be fatal lah. Okay, because it's highly concentrated. Sebab untuk guna kat luar kan.
Okay, ni minyak cakapak ni, counter pain ni macam cream, and also bawah ni LMS cream lah. So the mechanism of toxicity of salicylate irreversible block the COX-1 pathway and modify the COX-2 pathway, resulting in a decrease in inflammation. Biasanya ni kalau macam doktor cakap dekat UK ke apa, kita pakai as painkiller, tapi kat sini kita pakai as antiplatelet lah. Antiplatelet.
Painkiller dan ubat hangover.
Ubat hangover dia pakai juga ada.
Dia orang suka makan aspirin for hangover. Headache. Hangover. Kepada siapa yang tak familiar dengan hangover, boleh tanya Iwan ke Jale ke
Akmal.
Movie kan.
Minum alkohol, lepas tu esok pagi tu macam pening, tak ingat.
Akmal macam banyak pengalaman.
Kan ada movie hangover.
So the mechanism of toxicity is stimulate the respiratory center, hypopnea ataupun hyperventilation. It's the first sign of toxicity lah kalau salicylate punya poisoning. Kita boleh note respiratory alkalosis in blood gas sample. Its other effect is uncoupling of the oxidative phosphorylation, which is simple term, it halts the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. Maksudnya nanti dekat dalam Krebs cycle kan, Krebs cycle yang ada carbohydrate metabolism semua tu, dia disrupt dekat uncoupling of the oxidative phosphorylation lah. This process will lead to build up of lactic acidosis and resulted in metabolic acidosis. So macam saya cakap tadi, aspirin dua benda yang dia boleh buat: stimulate respiratory center causing hyperventilation and lead to respiratory alkalosis, and dia boleh interfere with biochemical in our body and form lactate formation lah. So, as salicylate stimulate the respiratory center to compensate the kidney increased amount of bicarb, potassium and sodium, leading to hypokalemia and dehydration in a patient with salicylate poisoning. Salicylate interfere with carbohydrate metabolism and lead to accumulation of lactic acid, ketones and organic acid, leads to metabolic acidosis, sebab yang macam saya cakap tadi lah. Other than that, salicylate cause hepatocyte damage, prolonged PT time as salicylate metabolized by liver and secreted through kidney. So, the clinical features kita boleh bagi kepada lah: mild poisoning, also severe poisoning. Patient akan datang dengan vomiting, lepas tu on examination ada tachycardia, patient nampak hyperventilate, demam.
Okay, this is why patient datang nampak hyperventilate, janganlah terus-terus label hyperventilation. Kena take proper history kan. Makcik-makcik, adik-adik datang hyperventilate ni, lepas tu bagi back valve, bagi high flow mask ke apa semua. You don't know tanta salicylate poisoning, because one of the signs of salicylate poisoning is hyperventilation. Okay, lepas tu korang letak kat hujung, tutup curtain kan. Okay, sedar-sedar patient fit kat dalam tu. Okay.
For severe poisoning, patient may come with convulsion, fitting, coma, respiratory and cardiovascular failure, acute renal failure, cerebral and also pulmonary edema. So samalah macam saya tadi, this clinical effect of salicylate intoxication. This one pun sama dalam form of gambar lah, from head to toe lah. Kalau you guys nak tengok, senang nak hafal kan. From kepala ada restlessness, irritability, lepas tu patient confused, lepas tu lip coma pun boleh juga, double vision lah. So management sama macam tadi ABCD kita kena monitor lah, tapi important dalam sali-sali poisoning ni kalau patient hyperventilate macam doktor cakap tadi, kita kena roll out course lah. So blood application boleh hantar baseline, ABC, RP, LFT, coag, ABG to see respiratory alkalosis. Imaging kita boleh buat chest x-ray to see any pulmonary edema. So salicylate kalau kita nak diagnose betul-betul, salicylate identified by positive ferric chloride test either with blood or urine sample lah. Tapi pun saya tak sure macam mana positive ferric chloride test ni, doktor.
Tak tahu.
Tapi biasa kita
hantar sampel ke Makmal je, nanti Makmal buat.
Oh, okey.
Hantar ke TDM level.
Betul TDM level. Terima kasih Dr. Wati. Okey.
Satu lagi nak tambah, early sign of salicylate poisoning apa?
Demam. Tak ada.
Tinnitus.
Tinnitus. Tinnitus. Okey.
Tinnitus tu early sign dia.
Okey. Terima kasih Dr. Wati. So kita boleh hantar blood salicylate level lah, TDM salicylate. If level more than 70 mg per deciliter is actually moderate to severe punya intoxication lah. Kalau more than 100 is serious and may lead to fatal. So macam management of any other toxicity, kita boleh perform if patient datang between 12 to 34 hours, and kita boleh bagi aktiviti charcoal jugalah. And then patient yang macam ni saya cakap tadi, patient ni will come with dehydration. So kita kena correct dehydration and alkalosis jugalah. Kita boleh bagi IV drip normal saline with or without potassium based on the potassium level. So macam samalah correct electrolyte imbalance, and vitamin K may be required if patient datang dengan ada bleeding tendency, ada bruises semua, lepas tu prolong PT INR. So kita boleh bagi vitamin K lah nak. So the main management of ada management yang kita boleh bagi dekat dalam patient with salicylate poisoning is forced alkaline diuresis lah. Macam waktu Alia present last Monday pun doktor dah cakap dah macam mana kita nak buat forced alkaline diuresis. Forced alkaline diuresis ni actually kita bagi sodium bicarb kat patient. So what is indication kita nak buat forced alkaline diuresis? First, if salicylate more than TDM level more than 50 mg per deciliter and clinical condition is poor lah. But we need to ensure good renal function with initial replacement volume deficit lah. Waktu patient datang kita nampak dia dehydrated, kita bagi IV drip resusc. Lepas tu kita mesti pasang apa tu panggil nak check urea output kan. Urea output, kalau urea output less than 4 ml per minute is necessary before urea output kena at least 4 ml per minute is necessary lah before forced diuresis. So misal kata kalau kita ambil tu, kita check urea, kita bagi IV resusc yang awal-awal tu, urea output is not good, kita boleh bagi challenge with furosemide lah. If still not good, kita kena abandon procedure lah. So how to give
this is important sebelum korang buat forced alkaline diuresis, nak bagi bicarb kat patient, ensure patient ada good urea output. Kena pasang CBD lah. And measure the urine output. Kena ada urea output dulu sebelum bagi. Kalau tak ada urea output, then you cannot do forced alkaline diuresis. Okay, you need to move on to your other method lah. Okay.
Okay, the regime of IV infusion yang kita boleh bagi untuk forced alkaline diuresis ni adalah 500 ml di 5% with 50 ml of 8.4% sodium bicarb for over 1 hour lah. Lepas tu kita boleh continue with 500 ml di 5% with 1 gram KCl and 500 ml normal saline with 40 mg of furosemide. All these three kita bagi setiap 500 tu at the rate of 1 hour lah, over 1 hour. So this cycle can be repeated twice or thrice lah, maintenance fluid requirement, tapi dengan syarat kita kena monitoring urine output, kita kena monitor urine pH level and also serum potassium in the patient lah. If the patient is still acidotic and serum pH less than 7.15, kita boleh bagi additional 1 to 2 millimole per kg sodium bicarb lah over 1 to 2 hour. So TDM level also we need to check regularly until kita nampak salicylate level tu consistently downward in trend lah. But certain patient kita tak boleh nak bagi forced alkaline diuresis. Contohnya macam patient memang dah ada fluid overload, ada pulmonary edema, lepas tu patient with poor urine output, ada renal failure. kita kena instead of bagi telan diuresis tu kita kena bagi ke urgent HD lah. Urgent HD kita boleh buat hemoperfusion ataupun peritoneal dialysis. It depend if patient ada if patient severe cases, blood level more than 100, kita kena buat. Patient refractory acidosis, maksudnya kita dah correct pun still acidotic lagi, so kita kena buat HD. Ataupun patient ada severe CNS symptom lah, patient dah patient dah drowsy, betul dah koma, dah semua kan, DCS poor, so kita kena buat lah. Macam saya cakap tadi, pulmonary edema, renal failure, memang kita kena buat HD instead of dialysis. Okay, is there any question for salicylate poisoning? Kalau tak ada, saya continue dengan benzodiazepine poisoning lah, doktor.
Okay.
So benzodiazepine are sedative, hypnotic or psychoactive drug lah, which are commonly used for a variety of situation that include seizure control, alcohol withdrawal and PNS agent also lah. Benzodiazepine poisoning is common but death is rarely unless patient tu datang, dia makan overdose benzo, lepas tu dia ambil alkohol juga. Yang tu ada boleh lead to death lah. So the mode of action of benzodiazepine is actually potentiate the inhibitory effect of GABA on the CNS. So this one is the mechanism of action of benzos lah. Benzo the binding dengan chloride channel complex with GABA receptor. Lepas tu dia stimulate lah, open the chloride ion channel which results in membrane hyperpolarization which inhibits cellular excitation. Sebab tu lah patient seizure ke apa, kita bagi benzodiazepine sebab dia nak inhibit excitation, cellular excitation. For the example of benzos, kita boleh bagi kepada dia punya action. Long acting, short acting, ultra short lah. Long acting macam diazepam, clonazepam, short acting alprazolam, lorazepam, and ultra short like midazolam yang kita selalu pakai. So clinical features, patient datang dengan benzodiazepine poisoning. Dia biasanya akan datang dengan weakness, ataxia, dysphagia, nystagmus, drowsiness, confusion, and in worst case patient will come with coma lah. Waktu on examination dia ada concentrated pupil dan respiratory desperation also. So the confirmation of the diagnosis is actually by TDM level ataupun serum level lah, tapi rarely ada value. Kalau patient ada memang history tu betul, memang biasanya patient benzodiazepine toxicity ni bila patient tu memang on medication lah, patient epilepsy ke memang on benzo kan, dia ada overdose, so history tu memang dah suggestive untuk benzodiazepine poisoning. So gastric lavage if seen early followed by single injection lah, ataupun kita boleh bagi repeated doses of activated charcoal, and we need to give supporting measure as other poisoning lah, sama macam I explained and Alia explained previously. So the antidote for benzodiazepine is flumazenil. Berapa dos kita bagi flumazenil is IV 200 microgram over 15 seconds. If needed, further doses of 100 microgram can be given lah for total dose 1 to 2 mg. Misal kata kita bagilah repeated dose ni sampai dekat 1 to 2 mg, tapi patient not improving. So kalau patient not improving, dia boleh jadi bukan benzodiazepine punya poisoning. So kita kena work out for any other poisoning lah. So bila kita dah bagi flumazenil, patient will improve lah kalau betul-betul benzodiazepine punya poisoning. So tapi disebabkan flumazenil ni dia punya acting is much shorter from most of the benzos. So we need to give repeating regime and continuous IV infusion lah, around 0.1 to 0.5 mg per hour. So this one is the image of flumazenil punya vial lah. Kalau satu vial tu ada 5 ml, dia 0.1 mg per ml lah, ataupun saya cakap 0.5 mg per 5 ml. So, as flumazenil is a competitive benzodiazepine receptor antagonist, it should be used cautiously lah because it has potential to precipitate benzodiazepine withdrawal in chronic user. Sebab kita patient on benzodiazepine, kita bagi benzodiazepine sebab tak nak bagi seizure. Bila kita dah bagi flumazenil ni banyak sangat, effect of benzodiazepine tu dah tak ada, so dia boleh lead to dia punya simptom yang asal. Kalau patient ada epilepsy, dia boleh lead to seizure back lah. So flumazenil administration is contraindicated in mixed overdoses because benzodiazepine reversal can precipitate seizure and also arrhythmia. Okay, that's all for benzodiazepine punya toxicity lah. Any question?
Ada soalan boleh dikemukakan di in-call messages juga. Benzo ni kena tahulah. Contoh benzo yang korang guna hari-hari.
Midazolam.
Bida.
Yes. Midazolam, Valium, semua ni kena tahulah. Kan? Bawa patient pergi CT scan, bagi mida, bawalah flumazenil sekali. Okay, and just like opioid punya overdose, flumazenil shouldn't be used for patient who chronically abuse midazolam lah. You can cause acute withdrawal, and flumazenil can also cause seizure. Janganlah ingat dia antidote pada benzo, dia adalah benda yang selamat sepenuhnya. Dia can cause seizure, dia reduce seizure threshold. So in patient with epilepsy, kalau yang korang bagi mida sebab nak pergi CT, kalau tak perlu reverse, tak payahlah reverse. Reverse for appropriate reason lah.
Okay. If no question regarding benzodiazepine, the last but not least is opioids lah. Opioids are potent respiratory depressants. Generally, opioids share the abilities to stimulate a number of specific opioid receptors in the CNS, which lead to sedation and will cause respiratory depression lah. Overdose is leading cause of death among people who use them lah. Biasanya patient heavy drug user lah kena cakap. Among people who inject drugs, opioids overdose is the second most common cause of mortality lah after HIV and also AIDS. Prolonged cerebral hypoxia is the mechanism for brain injury and death in opioid overdose. Ni X-ray and also CT scan. Ni gambar apa ni kawan-kawan?
Hari tu kan kita ada cerita pasal body packer kan.
Betul. Ni
yang ni lah nak buat whole bowel irrigation ni. Kalau nak buat whole bowel irrigation ni yang macam ni lah.
Betul. Ni kalau patient yang ni lah, kedai dadah lah. So patient kedai dadah pun dia boleh datang dengan overdose jugalah. Bila dah lama sangat dia boleh pecah dia punya kondom yang kita bagi kita letak, bukan kita letak lah, orang tu letak untuk transport dadah kan. So patient boleh datang dengan overdose juga. So patient macam ni kita boleh buat bowel irrigation lah macam doktor cakap. Tapi kita buat tu bukan untuk instead of one of it untuk decontaminate, but actually to buang the sac lah, kondom yang dah pecah tu. So this is classification of opioids, natural, semi-synthetic and synthetic lah. These are the examples of it lah under each column. So signs and symptoms of opioid overdose. The triad of coma, pinpoint pupils and depressed respiration is strongly suggest opioid overdose lah. Plus dengan dia punya clinical history lah. Kalau patient mau IV drug user, kita examine memang pinpoint pupils, memanglah ada opioid overdose lah. The less common complication yang kita boleh nampak, patient boleh datang dengan hypotension, bradycardia, hypothermia, masuk arrhythmia. This one is a simple diagram lah yang saya jumpa, saya attach sekali lah. Macam you guys nak print out, nak tampal kan, senang nak hafal kan. Symptoms and treatment lah. So treatment, supportive measure, macam biasa lah sebab patient datang dengan respiratory depression. So kena maintain pattern airway lah. Kalau need intubation, kena intubation lah for ventilation. So management, saya cakap tadi, maintain the airway, supplemental oxygen lah. If patient datang dengan coma, seizure, hypotension, pulmonary edema, kita kena treat accordingly. So the antidote for opioids is naloxone yang selalu kita bagi. Naloxone is pure opioid antagonist lah, used in all cases of suspected opioid overdose. Also very useful when opioids are used together with alcohol or CNS depressant. This is the action lah of naloxone. Naloxone dia block the opioid receptor in the brain so that opioid tu tak dapat nak bind, and so boleh reverse lah the symptoms of opioid punya toxicity. So how to give naloxone? Naloxone we give by IV 0.4 to 0.12 mg, repeated at interval of 3 to 5 minutes to achieve a respiratory rate of about 15 minutes or max of 10 mg if respiratory function does not improve lah. Naloxone duration of action is shorter than most opioids, hence repeated doses is necessary. We may give as IV naloxone to mg diluted in 500 ml di 5% or normal saline at rate 100 cc per hour, then adjust accordingly to respond. Maksudnya samalah macam flumazenil tadi. Dia punya action is shorter than the most opioids. So bila kita bagi IV naloxone, patient dah improve, patient dah apa, respiratory rate dah improve, kita tak boleh dah tinggal patient macam tu. So kita kena monitor patient. Sebab kita takut action of naloxone tu dah stop, so patient boleh jadi respiratory depression again. So kena monitor, tak boleh lah lepas kita tengok patient tu, kita belah terus tengok patient lain tinggal macam tu saja nah.
Okay, ingat Khairul cakap So any patient yang opioid overdose, yang ada respiratory depression, lepas bagi naloxone, jangan bahagia sangat. Tinggal, tutup curtain. Dia takut dia go back into respiratory depression lah. Sebab naloxone dia short acting je. Some patient may require naloxone infusion lah. Kalau yang betul-betul opioid overdose yang macam quite high dose
So we need to watch out for sign of overtreatment lah, hyperventilation, muscle tremor, tachycardia and also hypertension. So patient yang chronic drug user, biasanya kalau kita bagi IV naloxone, kita taper down accordingly, dia boleh menyebabkan acute withdrawal symptom lah. Contohnya macam abdominal pain, sweating, diarrhea pupils, diarrhea and also pyeloerection lah. So kalau patient datang, kita bagi IV naloxone bolus, lepas tu kita bagi IVI infusion. So kita kena taper down accordingly slowly lah, tak boleh turunkan laju sangat. So untuk avoid this acute withdrawal symptom lah in patient with chronic narcotic abuser. Is there any question? That's all from me today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Saya tak ada apa-apa.
Kamu ada soalan?
Dr. Fairuz.
Ya.
Apa tu ni? Macam tramal kan? Dia kan a type of opioid. Ada pernah patient overdose tramal?
Apa dia? Ada patient overdose tramal?
Ada.
Segala jenis ubat di dunia ni ada yang overdose lah. Termasuk Viagra dan sebagainya. Semua ada overdose. Bila ubat tu, ada ubat, adalah orang yang akan overdose dengan ubat tu lah. So tramal ada orang overdose. Tapi it's not a popular drug untuk overdose because it's not easily available lah. In the end, benda ni it's a matter of convenience. Kalau tramal tu memanglah boleh beli, tapi tramal ni not something yang orang biasa akan beli berpapan-papan apa semua kan. So tramal, cuma the problem with tramal ni dia pun dia synthetic punya opioid. So naloxone partially reverses tramal lah. So dia tak macam kalau patient ambil morphine apa semua. Sama juga macam fentanyl. Fentanyl pun synthetic opioid juga. So it's not fully reversible by naloxone. So kalau if you rajin tengok dokumentari ke apa, macam fentanyl ni is something yang couple of years back has caused quite a lot of crisis lah dekat US because doctors readily prescribe fentanyl for every sort of pain. Sebab mereka pun ada preparation oral fentanyl apa semua, fentanyl patch dan sebagainya. So dia menyebabkan ada crisis lah dekat US. Banyak orang jadi addicted. I think it was called apa opioid crisis kot. This was before COVID. Zaman Trump dulu kot. There was a big crisis lah dekat US. Banyak rakyat dia addicted to opioid because doktor dia, semua orang ada pain kan. Prescribe je opioid. So just so be careful about drugs that you use lah. I mean kita kan guna banyak a lot of fentanyl, a lot of morphine tu korang takut lagi sebab dengan nama morphine, tapi fentanyl dengan tramal ni kadang-kadang diberi sesuka hati juga. So just be careful. People can go into respiratory depression with morphine, with tramal and fentanyl. Especially elderly Kadang-kadang you ingat fentanyl 50 microgram tu biasalah standard dose for everyone. Some elderly, especially the frail old ladies ni, you bagi 50 microgram fentanyl, literally nak kena tube lah. So you need to be aware lah, especially bila nak buat benda macam PSA kan. Standard dose biasa bagi apa? Fentanyl 50 microgram. Like, it's worse kalau bagi fentanyl dengan propofol. Because both are agents that can cause respiratory depression. So be careful lah. Bukan kata tak boleh. You need to be aware of the side effect. Because sometimes in the end you never know kan siapa yang akan affected. Mungkin out of 100 elderly patient you bagi 50 microgram fentanyl tak ada apa-apa. Tapi yang ke 101 tu jadi something kan. So you need to be prepared on how to deal with the complication lah. Tu je. Just be aware. Any drugs that you want to give to patient, you need to be aware of the side effects. So you can deal with it properly lah. So opioid dengan benzo ni antara benda yang commonly lah korang guna kan. Nak sedate patient, nak pay patient in pain dan sebagainya. So be aware of the complication. And bersedia lah. Kan, kod nak minta flumazenil ke, nak minta naloxone ke. Ni benda yang patutnya ada di dalam minda anda lah bila menggunakan opioid dan benzo. Okay, soalan? Lagi apa ada kekeliruan yang tidak jelas nak tanya?
Tak ada lah.
Dr. Hati, ada yang cakap apa-apa Dr. Hati?
Oh, nama saya diseru, tak ada apa-apa lah.
Diseru lah. Okay.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Terima kasih Doktor.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Terima kasih Dr. Virus. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Dr. Virus, terima kasih Dr. Hati.